Hello, dog morning to you. Welcome to the good world. I'm Seth. That's Charlie. I don't know if you can even see him right now. He's kind of, well, he's doing his usual thing. You know how it goes. I hate this turn. Okay. Hi. So, yesterday I started to talk a little bit about sort of the idea of total nonviolence, and so I want to talk about that a little more. I've been thinking, I think there is a metaphor that is sort of a good way to think about the way that what we would generally call evil exists in the world. You know, I think there is this is something I've talked about before, but there's sort of a tendency to look at harmful actions and label them as evil, and label the person committing them as evil, right? And we talk about, you know, oh, that person is pure evil, or the Twitter version of it that you've probably seen a lot is like, you're a real piece of shit, you're a real scumbag, and we do that a lot. We do stuff like that, and we sort of have this internal narrative in our heads when we do that we're doing something good, right? We're identifying bad behavior, we're calling it out, we're fighting for justice, and we're the hero in the story we tell about those interactions. And you know, reality is a little more complicated than that. We are not, our stories have heroes and villains, and it's sort of very easy to think that one-dimensional character nature applies to actual people around us. But the truth is, people are all everywhere you go, and I've been to a lot of places, and I've met a lot of people. I mean, one thing that my privilege has definitely given me is the ability to travel, and, you know, being the whole like non-threatening white man thing. I've talked about this before also, but I can walk into basically any room, and no one's going to be, for the most part, no one's really going to be wary of me, and so they'll engage with me like I'm a person and they're a person, and it doesn't change the fact that they may have some views that are really harmful, and it doesn't change the fact that they may have done or continue to do things that are harmful. But the reality of humanity is that all of us have within us the potential to do both good and bad. And when we just label people as pure evil, or a real piece of shit, or a real scumbag, we're taking a mental shortcut. And one of the biggest things I've learned through my background in social science and social psychology is that pretty much everything that our brain does is about taking a shortcut. You know, we like to think that our brains are there to really reason through the world and understand the world. And I know I sort of talked a bit yesterday about rationalization, but it really is like the main thing that our brains have evolved to do is conserve energy. And thinking about difficult things takes a lot of energy out of your brain. And so we do end up doing, you know, we simplify stories about the world, about ourselves, about other people, and we convince ourselves that that's the truth. And there's no shame in your brain being lazy, because all of our brains are lazy. It's literally just how they're wired. Because, you know, back on the savannah, if you were being chased by a predator, it would help to be less tired, and if you had been thinking really hard, that would make you more tired. But we're also lucky that we live in a modern world where there aren't a whole lot of, excuse me, that's a loud truck, where there aren't a whole lot of predators trying to eat us, and that's good, because that gives us a little more freedom to do some hard thinking. But it's also something where, you know, if you're working a wage job or two or three, and really struggling to get by, you also don't have the energy left over to do this kind of hard thinking. But those of us who are sort of blessed enough to and lucky enough to not have those concerns. We do have the capacity to do that hard thinking, but we still avoid it because the instinct to avoid it is kind of built into us. And so, if there is one takeaway that you have from this entire channel, I would like it to be that your brain is lazy, my brain is lazy, everyone's brain is lazy. And so the question is, what are we going to do about it, and how can we sort of identify it in ways that are going to make the world better? I generally think that the automatic behavior that drives the automatic patterns that drive our behavior, are the main cause of like human suffering in the world and sort of all of our societal problems. There's a tendency with conspiracy theories, like the underlying reason that people believe conspiracy theories is that so much stuff is so messed up that I know, Charlie, I know, we'll be at the park in like 10 minutes or so. I know, it's so hard to be a dog. Yeah, you're having a lot of feelings. You're okay. I know, just stick your head out the window. You're fine. You love a good wind machine. Or lie down. That's also fine. It's really tempting to think that all of the problems we have are because someone is intentionally causing them. But if you learn enough about social psychology, it's pretty easy to sort of come to the realization that no one is in control. And even the people who are more in control than others are really not in control either of themselves or certainly of anyone else. It's much harder to control other people than we tend to think. So, yes, your brain is taking shortcuts, my brain is taking shortcuts, and if you add all of those shortcuts up, you get a world in which people are really defensive of their beliefs. You get a world in which everyone thinks, well, there's just pure evil out there, and so I need to spend my life on the lookout for pure evil, because it's sooner or later it's going to try and come get me. And that's not to deny the reality of a lot of people's experiences, right? I mean, I've talked about my grandparents were Holocaust survivors. That is among the closer things that human beings have experienced to pure evil. But the people who were doing those things to them were still people. They weren't supervillains. And when we think of them as supervillains, we miss the real cause of these things, and we end up not actually being able to solve them, and that's a really big problem. So here's sort of the metaphor that I've been playing around with in my head. I know, Charlie, I hate metaphors. Pooh, ma'am, please only speak in literal things. No metaphor. It's not even that much of a metaphor. It's maybe more of an analogy, and it's still not even that much. But so imagine there's a school, right? Let's say you live in a town, and the town is the entire extent of the world, just to make things a little simpler. And there are 1,000 people in the town, and then there's a school that produces 10 students a year. And those 10 students are taught to believe that everyone else in the town is inferior to them, is evil, is lazy, is violent, and that the entire purpose of the school is to fight back against those evil, lazy, violent people, and to maintain the dominance of the 10 students every year who come out of that school. And so those 10 students are going to graduate every year, and some of them may sort of see their way around it, but most of them will come into their interactions. Let's say you are a person who is one of the other, the vast majority of the people in this town. They are going to enter their interactions with you really, really wary and really defensive, and with their guard up. And they're going to come into those interactions, and they are going to think that you're evil, they're going to think that you're violent, they're going to think that you're lazy, and whatever else. And they may say as much. And so if they say something, you're probably going to be pretty sick of being called evil and violent and lazy. And so you may snap at them, you may just get like a little touchy, but you probably won't take it super well. And one of the shortcuts that our brains take is confirmation bias, where we come in. There are actually two things at work here. One is confirmation bias, the other is self-fulfilling prophecy. So confirmation bias, boy, by the way, side note, I really wish that social psychologists maybe had slightly simpler terms for things. These ones are at least a little easier than like cognitive dissonance, but we'll talk about that at some point too. So confirmation bias is when you go in expecting to see something, you will identify pieces of evidence that confirm the thing that you believe, and you'll ignore, totally unintentionally and unconsciously, you will ignore the things that sorry, that there was very nearly an accident in front of me, but everyone's fine. Your brain will identify the things that confirm what you already believe, because remember, reevaluating a thing that you already believe is difficult for your brain, so it's going to avoid doing that. And so in this case, this person is going to come in and they already believe that you are evil and violent and lazy, and so anything you do that confirms those beliefs, they're going to seize on, and their brain is going to say, aha, I was right, you are evil and violent and lazy. And so the self-fulfilling prophecy is sort of a similar thing, but that's, the mere fact that this other person came into their interaction with you, this student, this graduate, came into the interaction with you with the belief that you are evil and violent and lazy, changed their behavior in a way that put you on the defensive, and so you probably reacted in a way that was angry, and they say, aha, you are evil and violent and lazy, it's what I was taught, it's what I already believe, here's some evidence, great, I don't have to think any harder. And I don't think any of us would look at someone who has been isolated from us for their entire life up to, young adulthood, and been taught that we are evil and violent and lazy. If they come to believe those things, I don't know that we would say that that person is evil. We would certainly understand that they have been taught some evil ideas and some harmful ideas. But the world is full of these schools. They are not as intentionally designed as this. Again, it's sort of the sum of all of our biases and defensiveness and all of those things. But the world it really is full of schools that teach people to hate each other and to fear each other, and to look down on each other. And so when we you can imagine, so if you were in a situation where you knew that school existed, it would change your behavior. We're clearly almost at the dog park because Charlie's very excited. If you encountered one of the graduates of this school, and you knew about the school, you would say, well, this person just came out of this school and the school has warped their brain. And you might even realize that if you showed some empathy and some compassion to this person, you might be able to get them to reevaluate their really harmful beliefs, instead of reacting and confirming them. That's hard, and that takes energy on your part, and so maybe you wouldn't, and that's okay too. We're all just kind of doing our best, but you can understand that that their hatred of you is not personal about you, and we wouldn't, you would understand that probably, if you can't help them see that you're not evil and violent and lazy, then at least you could just avoid interaction with them. But in our day-to-day interactions, because there is no specific school where that happens that we know about, we we don't have that reaction. We have the same reaction we would have if we lived in this town and we had no idea this school existed. We would just get upset, we would get angry, and we might call them evil, and that would just keep all of this fighting going. And so, in thinking about the world from this perspective, I have decided that the best thing that I can do to try to make things better is to, when I see bad behavior, I think it is important to talk about it, right? I think it's important to say to the graduate of this school, hey, you've learned something that's really harmful, and that's doing harm, and it's incorrect, and I hope you can reevaluate those things. But it's not super helpful to scream at them, to verbally abuse them, and to call them, pure evil or a real piece of shit or a scumbag, because they got there the same way we got to where we are, which is that they were shaped by the forces around them that are much bigger than them and that they didn't choose. And so we can either keep being controlled by the forces that we didn't choose, or we can choose to shape our own destiny and our own environment. And we can choose to create an environment around ourselves that loves everyone in the way, I take a lot of inspiration. I know, Charlie. I take a lot of inspiration from Jesus here, even though I'm nominally Jewish. But this is what turning the other cheek is about, right? It really is about being able to look at the harm that someone has done and see the system behind it. Because if you sit there and you try to destroy if you destroy every one of the 10 graduates each year from this school, I know, Charlie, we're gonna get out of the car in a second. There's still gonna be 10 more next year, and so the thing we need to change is the school, and we need to work on the people who come out of it. And so it's complicated. The world is complicated, but that's the analogy I've been thinking of. Charlie really wants to get out of the car, so we're going to do that now, but I'll be back in a moment. I know, beeps. Here we go. Yeah, okay. Hello, this is just a reminder that if you are enjoying what you are seeing here, please click like and subscribe. There in directions, and you can continue following this. Please share this channel with people who you think might find it enjoyable, and if you hate it, then don't do those things. But I hope you don't. Okay, great. We'll be right back. Hi, here we go. On the way back from the dog park. I have to try to remember what my train of thought was, because we ended up having a nice long dog park outing. Good friends, good dogs, everybody happy. So yeah, I guess I was talking about. Also, I'm sorry, because you're watching this and you're like, "What? I just saw you say all of this stuff. Why do you have to rediscover what you were talking about? I know what you were talking about." Well, sorry. So I have spent a lot of my life, all I've ever really wanted to do was try to make the world a little better. And that's how I got into politics. And it's also why I left politics, because I felt like my contributions were not really doing enough to make things better. And the truth is, there are other people who are significantly better at what I did in politics. And just because I sort of had enough of a reputation based on having gotten into the political data world earlier than some other folks. But there are other people who have sort of come along to fill in behind me who are a lot more talented. And so, I can kind of get out of the way and let them take over. But I think an area, what I'm trying to do here, and I've talked about this a little before, is just trying to have a good, nice, positive impact on culture. But so, thinking about these questions of how how to respond to bad behavior and harmful behavior in the world. And, you know, I sort of talked about our tendency to, you know, you're a real piece of shit, you're a scumbag, you're pure evil, all those things that we say to one another, that we really tell ourselves are about, we tell ourselves that that's the way that we're making the world better. But we're not really doing that. And so sort of thinking about, you know, this example of the person who comes out of the evil school, from this analogy. It's more of an analogy than a metaphor. I don't know if it's even an analogy. I guess it's just sort of an illustration. That's probably a better word for it. Words are hard. That's also a problem, right? We have like really complicated concepts that we struggle to articulate, and we also have really complex feelings that we struggle to articulate. And so that ends up coming out as, you know, when we say something like "you're a real piece of shit," that is just our brain's way of dealing with the fact that we have this anger that we don't. It's hard to express, and it's much easier and a much lighter burden for our brain, much less effort for our brain to just spit it out that way. So we take this person from this evil school, and, you know, they say something evil because they've been taught evil things, and we say to them, "You're a real piece of shit, you're pure evil." And what happens? What happens is they think, "I was right about you," and I know I said this before, but, you know, they believe their belief in what they already thought gets reinforced. And that is, you know, if we think by telling them that they're evil we're doing something good, then we should at least be able to identify some kind of good impact. And so maybe, so it's pretty clear that we are not going to change their minds by calling them evil. And you know, we're not necessarily going to change their minds by responding with empathy and compassion, but we have a chance. And, you know, the statistician in me says, well, a chance of doing something good is better than 100% chance of reinforcing these harmful beliefs. A thing that I used to tell myself in terms of why it was good for me to attack people for their evil views, is that, well, you know, it may not affect them, but it'll at least influence other people who may be observing, right? And this is a huge part of social media, is that there are not just the people we're engaging with directly, but everyone else who sees the conversation. And the problem is if I am, let's say I am a third-party observer, let's say I have come into, the town as a tourist, and I don't really know anything about it. Just going to keep torturing this idea. So let's say I come in, I don't have any previous understanding of the school or the population or any of it, and I see two people interacting, and one of them, you know, says something. Especially, I think part of what's complicated is that when it comes to things like bigotry, a lot of the things that get said are sort of coded, and they're dog whistles, right? So the bigot isn't going to come out and just say something that is like obviously evil and heartless, and so, you know, if I'm a third-party observer and I see this interaction and I see the evil student say whatever they say, and I see someone respond to it by just unloading on them, I'm probably not going to go, oh, this person who is having this extreme emotional reaction is probably right, which is unfortunate, because I actually, you know, I think our extreme emotional reactions, they always come from a place of truth. Sometimes they are sort of a place of truth that has been completely contorted into something else. And so I would say, for example, an extreme emotional reaction coming from the evil student is there is a true feeling of pain from their having been lied to, even if they can't recognize that it's a lie. And so that those kinds of reactions come from a place of truth. But anyway, most people, when they see that kind of interaction, are going to assume that there is, some validity in both sides, and just the person who's reacting just couldn't control their emotions. And that is also not going to convince a third-party observer that the person from the evil school is saying something evil. And so it becomes pretty clear once you think about it enough that our tendency to call someone evil, call someone a piece of shit, call someone a scumbag, is not about addressing the actual problem. It's about our reaction, and it's about getting rid of the negative feelings that we have as quickly as possible. It's a disgust response, right? It's a revulsion and an aversion, which is another thing that our brains are wired to do, because it's beneficial. You think of something like, I don't know, vomit. Some people, even just talking about it will make them feel queasy. There are other sensory reactions that might bring it out. But there's sort of an evolutionary thing there where, you don't want to get too close to it because there may be illness attached to it, viruses, whatever. And so the same thing happens when we have a disgust reaction to someone's behavior. But our tendency to lash out at them is about our disgust reaction, and it's about our brain's desire to get rid of these feelings as quickly as possible. And the fastest and easiest and most energy efficient way for our brain to do that is to just immediately construct a narrative. This person is evil, I'm going to unload on them, and we then keep convincing ourselves that that's a good thing, and it just keeps the cycle going. So I think it is, at least to me, it is pretty clear at this point that just sort of unloading on someone who is espousing some kind of harmful belief, even if it's really harmful, unloading on them is not a productive way to deal with the problem. It's not going to solve the problem. And that's sort of a hard thing, and especially the more pain and trauma that you've internalized, the harder it is to address that reaction. And so I'm not saying you're a bad person if you unload on someone, but I'm saying that, when you do that, try to be mindful of what's happening in your brain and what is driving you to do that, and try to sort of practice working yourselves in a different direction, because I think, speaking for myself, I've been able to find a lot more peace, and I've been able to have some productive conversations. I mean, I got into there was a whole Twitter exchange where someone, talked about, it was a men's rights activist, and he was talking about how, feminists are trying to destroy men, and I sort of got into a conversation with him, and I was like, in my experience, I have a lot of friends who are feminists. I don't think they want to destroy men. But I think that patriarchy is something that does harm to both men and women, and part of how it does that harm is by turning us against each other and making us think that we have to choose between rights for men and rights for women. And that's not true. And I was able to have a productive conversation with this guy, and he even reached a point where he said, well, yeah, I guess I got this from watching some red pill videos, and I guess maybe they're not as reliable as I thought. And that was honestly one of the biggest breakthroughs that I have ever had with another person. And it took a lot of emotional energy on my part, but I was able to get there by empathizing and seeing this person's humanity, but also by being really clear in articulating my own morals and my own views. And so that's sort of the other part of this, right? It's, if someone is saying or doing something harmful, I think I have, sort of made my case for why I don't think it is productive to respond with sort of verbal violence. But that raises another part of the question, which is, okay, but do we just sort of let it go? I don't think that's right either, because that enables harm as well. But I think the best that we can hope to do is to clearly articulate our own views, and to do so non-judgmentally, which is hard, right? It's really hard to hear someone saying something that is obviously reprehensible and sort of restrain ourselves from passing judgment on them. And it's not to say, oh, they, actually they're good. I'm not interested in the question of good or evil. I'm interested in how we stop other people from hurting other people. And so when we pass judgment on people, they feel defensive. And the truth is, you cannot persuade someone when they are on the defensive. The only way you can persuade someone is to make them feel like it is safe for them to acknowledge the harm they're doing. And so it's a tough balance to strike, but we can do a lot of good when we can be clear and honest about our own worldview and our own morals, and the fact that everyone has value. To borrow there's a line I love from Rebecca Traister, who's a fantastic feminist author. She says we're fighting for a world where everyone has value, and that's what I'm trying to work towards. But if you react to someone with judgment and with anger, what they see is that you're fighting for a world in which everyone has value except for them. And that's not necessarily that's certainly not what you may have in your head or in your heart. But communication is really important. And we can't just expect other people to understand that our true feelings are different from the things that we communicate. Frankly, Susie and I this is something we've been talking about a lot in our marriage, because something I said to her last week is, I really wish you could read my mind. And we've been together for over 5 years now. We've been married for 2.5 years. And there are things, a thing that is really frustrating to me is that sometimes when I say something, she will interpret it in a way that is not what I meant, and that I feel is uncharitable to me. But that is, and that's tough, because it's like, this is the person who knows me best in the world and who loves me more, loves me unconditionally and vice versa, and there is still this element of, you don't understand me, you think I'm this like awful person. But the only way through that is to communicate. And so if Susie and I still have those challenges in our marriage, which is generally a pretty good marriage, and again, we know each other really well, then there's no question you're going to have those miscommunications with a stranger on Twitter. And so the most important thing that we can do is communicate honestly and clearly. It is not helpful for us to unload our emotions onto someone else, because literally that's all figuratively that's all we're doing, is we're taking our feelings and we're unloading them. We're not communicating, we're not expressing ourselves, we are just dumping our feelings on someone else. And we all know how terrible it feels when someone does that to us. And yet, we have convinced ourselves through the power of inherited narrative and internalized narrative that in certain circumstances, as long as the person deserves it, dumping your feelings on them is actually a good thing. And again, I'm not saying you're a bad person if you do it. I'm just saying that if you want to make the world a better place, it is really useful and helpful if you can set a goal of moving away from doing that and get away from the rationalization that I talked about yesterday, and sort of the desire to talk ourselves into doing, desire is not the right word, the internal instinct really to talk ourselves into justifying the behavior that we inherently want to do just out of reaction, pure emotional reaction. If we can do the work, and it does take work, it takes time and it takes emotional energy and it takes practice, and for me that's a big part of what my meditation practice is about. But if we can put those ideas into practice and really work towards getting past our own pain and trying to be the person that we know that we can be and show other people what it looks like to be good and communicate what it looks like to be good, as opposed to condemning people for having been educated in the evil school. We can make things a whole lot better, and it doesn't have to take generations and generations. It's something we can do really fast if we all decide to do it. And that's not an easy thing to do, and it's putting our trust in humanity to make that decision is definitely a leap. And I'm not saying that it's a thing that I expect humanity to definitely do super easily. Like that, it's hard. But the only way that we can make things better is through communication, and through recognizing that no matter how hard we try to control and coerce people into being better, when we use control and coercion as tactics, we tend to just make them worse. And I'm not talking about at a policy level. I think policy conversations are tricky and are different, but I think at an individual, cultural, human interaction level, all we can do is look after our own behavior. I have given up on the idea that I can control other people. And frankly, I don't want to control other people. I'm not qualified to be the decider of who is good and who is not, and I don't think any of us are. But I can try to influence other people to overcome all of the conflict in the world and all of the pain that all of us, real pain that all of us have experienced to different degrees, and internalized to different degrees. I can't control anyone or push anyone into living out my worldview. The best I can do is try to live my own values myself as best I can, and communicate those values to other people, and try to show what I think the world can be. Because it's just not possible to force it on other people. But if we can have sort of this movement, if we can have a movement towards, towards this kind of nonviolence, we can make something a lot better. I have recently been really inspired. I've been reading. At this point, I haven't picked it back up in a month or so, because ADD brain, I get very sucked into different books. And also when I was really depressed for a month or so there, and so I kind of stopped reading, and I was playing a lot of video games instead, because that's sort of what I do when I need to distract myself. But I was reading a lot of Martin Luther King. And not just I Have a Dream, not just Letter from a Birmingham Jail, but some of his essays and sermons that are less frequently taught. And he talks a lot about a lot of these same ideas, and that's an important part of this too, right? These are not my ideas. They go back thousands of years, and they sort of keep coming back up. And I am doing this channel not to claim any greatness of my own part, but because I think these ideas are really important, and we consistently as human beings, we lose track of them. And so the more people we have articulating these values, I think the better. And so that's what I'm trying to do. But I think it's important to note that sort of on a policy level, there's a reason that the movement that Martin Luther King built was so effective in changing the way that people felt. And I know there's a common response of, and he got murdered for it. And yeah, that's true. And it's horrible. And it's really fucked up that we live in a world where a lot of people would rather act out in violence than process their own pain. But I also think the only thing that we can do is keep trying to sort of be our best selves and show them. There's a long history of people being assassinated for pursuing peace and nonviolence, and it includes King, it includes Gandhi, and it includes Jesus. And I've been thinking a lot about, we have a lot in our society where we sort of glorify the idea of dying for a good cause. And in my mind, I don't have a death wish. I enjoy living. There's so much in the world to explore and wonder at and enjoy, and I love getting to be a human being. And I know how fortunate I am to get to be a human being who doesn't have to fight for survival every day. Lost my train of thought a little bit. But the only cause that I am willing to die for is peace, and I don't want to. Please don't kill me. Please just let me live my life with my dog and my wife and my friends, and don't kill me. Join me, because it's pretty good, and help me work towards something better, right? Like, that's what I would ask. But if we die for a cause other than peace, then all we're doing is making someone else feel that they need to die for the other side of that cause. So yeah, that got a little deathy at the end, little grim. And also, I think it is important to note that, like, culturally, neither Martin Luther King nor Gandhi nor Jesus are, like, culturally mine, and I am sort of I am acutely aware of the tendency of, especially, like, there are a lot of white people out there who use the words of King to try to shame and coerce black folks into tolerating injustice, and that's it's certainly not what I am trying to do, and I recognize sort of the discomfort in my being a white American Jew talking about King and Gandhi and Jesus. But I think all of them had really important wisdom to pass on, and so I'm trying to learn from that and to incorporate it into my own life, and so I hope. I hope that my doing that doesn't cause other people pain, because that's the opposite of the goal here. I would also say that, like, compassion is not a replacement for working towards justice. Something that I tweeted about recently is how I'm trying to work towards peace, but peace doesn't just mean we stop fighting each other. It also means an end to oppression. It means an end to injustice. Real peace means fully recognizing everyone else as a human being, no matter how little we may understand them. If someone has learned something from their experiences and their background, who are we to judge, right? And it doesn't mean that we can't articulate our values clearly, and it doesn't mean that we can't point out when something is doing harm. But the way to get to peace is to highlight these things without decreasing peace, without increasing violence. And so total nonviolence, for me, has really started to mean not just physical nonviolence, which is an important part of it, but emotional nonviolence, which is really understanding the way that our words can affect others, and the defensiveness that criticism inevitably, just as part of the way the human brain is wired, anytime we say something critical of someone, they will likely be defensive. And so it doesn't mean we shouldn't say anything, but it means taking care with how we say it. And I know there's a tendency to say, well, it's not my responsibility, and that's true. It's not your responsibility, but it's still a thing you can do. And so I would encourage you to try to build the strength within you to do that. So that's the emotional nonviolence part of it, right? People will, even if we don't think we are being emotionally violent, people will perceive it that way. And so we need to take care with it. Again, this is something that Susie and I do in our marriage. We have to speak hard truths to each other, not all the time, but sometimes, right? Sometimes one of us will do something that really upsets the other. And it's really important to talk about it, because if we don't talk about it, it tends to get worse. And so we need to talk about it, but we also love each other deeply, and so we need to talk about it in a way that recognizes the other person's humanity, recognizes their perspective and point of view. And, you know, it's sort of hard to treat everyone like they're your spouse, but we have inherited, for better or worse, we're all kind of in an arranged marriage together, right? There is no escaping the fact that all of us are here on this earth, and all of our actions affect one another. And so, you know, we can avoid that truth, but it's the truth. We can't just cut out any segment of humanity. And there may be things we can do to isolate ourselves, but that's different, for one thing. So yeah, that's sort of all the emotional nonviolence part of it. And then the third part of total nonviolence for me is economic nonviolence, because we live in a society, and there's both a personal and a societal level for this. At the personal level, for me, that means when I engage in a transaction with someone over whatever, I don't try to screw them, right? I try to, I'm not necessarily gonna like grossly overpay someone for something, but I try to pay people what they are genuinely worth. And we have a tendency in our society, and this is a huge part of the way that, I think there are good aspects of capitalism and plenty of bad aspects. And I think the more you get into any kind of purist ideology, the more harm it does. There's a fair amount of like purist capitalist doctrine that has sort of taken hold, in the modern world in general and in America in particular. And part of that is this norm that two people are supposed to go into a transaction trying to get the absolute best deal they can get for themselves. And there's sort of a hand-wavy belief that that'll somehow result in everything being good. But what I have learned from growing up with a decent amount of sort of wealth and access to power is that all it means is that the person who has more power can get the better deal, and the person who has less power gets screwed over again and again and again. And so I, as someone with more disposable income through a combination of, a lot of it is circumstance and good fortune. But the fact that I have more disposable income than other people means that they need money more than I do. And so that means I can go into a transaction, and that gives me leverage that the person on the other side may not have. And so if I put the screws to them every time, great, I'm going to win, and I'm just doing harm to someone for no reason other than, selfishness and having internalized a narrative that is honestly a bunch of bullshit justification for doing harm. A big part of all of this is honestly just trying to understand which of our narratives are actually just rationalizations for hurting each other and which of our narratives have some truth. And there's always, pretty much every narrative has a bit of truth and a bit of rationalization. I've said before, only good ideas, the only ideas that get used to harm people are good ideas. Because if it's an obviously bad idea, no one's going to adopt it. But you can take a good idea, again, the example of nonviolence and sort of standing up for justice, and you can use it for harm by trying to tell people who are oppressed to accept their oppression. That's a pretty good example of a good idea being used for bad reasons. And so a big part of the way we end up doing economic violence is we've internalized these narratives, and we just tell ourselves, oh, I'm just doing what I'm supposed to do. I'm actually contributing to something good by trying to get the best possible deal for myself, and making everything into a zero-sum exchange. So economic nonviolence at the personal level is really just about it's just about letting go of that idea and just trying to find something that's fair. What's a price that I'm comfortable paying, that they are comfortable accepting, and not trying to really tighten the screws and get the best possible thing. The way we end up with such inequality in our society is through this narrative, and this is sort of where the macro level of economic violence / nonviolence comes into play, is that this narrative, this idea of everyone is just supposed to get their best possible thing, and that's just what you're supposed to do. I'm just doing what I'm supposed to do. I'm, hiring the best possible lawyers so I can pay the least possible amount in taxes, and so that, at the end of this deal, I can make the most possible profit, can deliver it to my shareholders, and pat myself on the back for a job well done. And that narrative does so much harm because it's an excuse. It's not a truth. It's an excuse. And it's an excuse to not have to think too hard about the other person's perspective. It's really much easier if we never have to think about our own perspective. But only thinking about our own perspective always does harm, because there's always someone else who's affected by our actions. And so at the societal level, there is a huge amount of economic violence that is done in the name of letting people who have a lot of wealth continue to accumulate wealth, because that's what they're supposed to do and that's what they expect, and that's this whole narrative that we've constructed. And again, it's not about blaming individuals, it's just about recognizing the truth in these higher level narratives. And I know there are a lot of folks out there who have not had a lot of interaction with people who are extremely wealthy or extremely well educated, or both. I've had a lot of interaction with people who are extremely wealthy or extremely well educated, or both, and they're not better than you. They're not better than, farmers I have met in Vietnam or Costa Rica or Nicaragua, or like various other places that I've been to. They're just also people. But there's a whole system set up to support their wealth and to grow their wealth. And it comes at the expense of everyone else. And so, I'm not here to shame people who have wealth. But I am here to tear down the idea that rampant accumulation of wealth by people who have wealth through mechanisms that increase their power, that's a good thing, right? If I can come away destroying the idea that actually it's good to do these things that end up increasing inequality, then I'll be happy. But we focus so much of our energy on the people who have wealth. And hey, guess why that is? That's because those are the people who have access to our legislators. And that is a huge problem in America, where so much of our campaign funding is dominated by private money. So you end up, and it's not even just big private money. Living in DC, I would get invited to fundraisers, and the buy-in for a fundraiser might be $100, which is not the same as maxing out, but is more money than most people can just arbitrarily drop on a campaign fundraiser so they can go and meet a politician who they think seems neat. And so there is, I think about everything from the perspective of a statistician. There's always bias. It's a question of what is the bias. And so the bias in the information that our legislators have is that the people they overwhelmingly tend to talk to are the people with the most money and power. And we have this idea that if someone has accumulated a lot of money and power, it means they're smarter, it means they're better, and that's who should be listened to. But the problem is, if you've accumulated a lot of money and power, you have no real understanding of the problems of the people who don't. Even if you grew up poor, if you have turned yourself into a billionaire, the problems that you dealt with when you were growing up poor are different than the problems that people who are poor today have. And so this entire system works, and again, coming back to what I was saying earlier, it's not even about, we have conspiracy theories that this is a matter of intentional control, and it's mostly not, because controlling people, as we've already discussed, is actually really hard to do. And so it's just the bias in everything leads us to these situations where the people with the most money and the most power, who are not only not any better than people who don't have money or power, but who don't understand the problems of the people who don't have money or power, end up setting the entire legislative agenda. And so we end up with an entire system that just reinforces all of the inequalities that are already baked into it, and screwing over most people. And that's how we end up living in what the Four Agreements calls hell, right? We live in this world where there's so much conflict and tension, and physical violence and emotional violence and economic violence. And we justify all of it by having some narrative about why one person deserves power, one person doesn't. Why one person deserves respect, one person doesn't. Why one person deserves wealth, one person doesn't. And all of those narratives are a huge bunch of bullshit. And you're not a bad person if you believe them, because they've been drilled into you for your entire life. But I really want to try to help you free yourself from that indoctrination, because the sooner all of us can accept that we've just kind of been indoctrinated, not even intentionally, but by other people's guesses from past generations, the sooner we can fix it. And all I want is to live in a world that isn't such a freaking hellscape. Okay. I'm gonna go eat lunch. I'm very worked up now. Charlie, it's funny, he's so chill when we get home, even though he totally wants to go inside and see Susie. He's now just at a point where he's like, yeah, I know, the human's gonna talk for a while. So I guess that's fine. Anyway, I'm gonna go and eat my lunch, gonna watch some Champions League soccer. And then I'll be back and we'll do some meditation, and we'll see if I've calmed down by then. And if I haven't, I will have come down by the end of the meditation session, so great. Okay, enjoy.
Please like and subscribe. Please like and subscribe. Please like and subscribe. Please like and subscribe. Please like and subscribe.
Okay, I'm recording this slightly out of order because this is we're going to do the meditation in a minute. But I just recorded the part where I did the meditation, and as I was meditating, some thoughts came into my mind that I think are worth sharing, because they're sort of a useful follow-up on all of the stuff that I was just talking about, which is, I think it's very, very easy to feel hopeless and to feel like this insane, angry, conflict-ridden, violent, unjust world that we have inherited, with also lots of good things, but lots of bad stuff. I think it is easy to feel hopeless about our potential for changing any of that. And the arc of history is long and all of that. But here's what I will say. On the one hand, never underestimate the inability of human beings to do horrible things when they feel threatened, and feeling threatened includes just the threat of feeling like a bad person. On the other hand, never underestimate the ability of human beings to learn and change and adapt when they feel that it is safe to do so. I genuinely believe that one of the biggest things holding back our entire species is a fear of feeling like we are bad, and a reluctance to learn and change if the lessons of learning and changing will indicate that what we've done in the past are bad, and we risk punishment, condemnation, retribution, all of the things that we are really afraid of. And so I genuinely believe that if we can create a space wherein people can honestly engage, all of us, with our own feelings, our own pain, our own fears, the things we believe and the things we want, and just learn to recognize each other's humanity, we can make things better, not just across centuries, but across, maybe not months, but certainly across years. I think there is hope that the world will get a lot better in my lifetime. And I say that even though across my lifetime there are a lot of ways in which the world has gotten a lot worse. I'm almost 39. I'll be 39 in a couple weeks. And my in my life, America has gone from a country that was not at war to a country that has been trapped in multiple wars for my entire adult life. And there's a pandemic, and there's all kinds of injustice and violence and I mean, mass shootings basically were not a thing when I was growing up. Columbine was my junior year of high school, and obviously now they're a pretty regular occurrence. So things can change for the worse very quickly, but that also means they can change for the better very quickly. And so I genuinely believe that it is possible that within my lifetime, we will learn to see each other as people, and try to start actually making things better. But the only way that that starts happening is if we learn to work through our pain, which is real pain. I'm not going to dismiss all of your feelings, right? Like, those feelings come from a real place. But we can do it if we all sort of take responsibility for healing ourselves. We can get better at casting that healing outward, and at honestly communicating our feelings to each other, without judgment and without anger and without fear. Because once you get to a certain point where you don't have the judgment and anger, you also don't have the fear, because you're not afraid of being wrong, because you know that you are just speaking honestly about humanity. So I really think we can get there, as dark as things are these days. Always darkest before the dawn. Plenty of, pick your cliche. But I really think we can get there. Again, never underestimate the ability of human beings to do horrible things to each other when we are afraid and invent a justification, but never underestimate the ability of human beings to learn and improve and grow when we don't feel threatened. I think the most important thing we can do for everyone is do our best to remove threats, and that includes the threats that we put out there ourselves. Frankly, the only thing we can really control is the threats we put out there for ourselves. Everything else we influence, we don't control. So if you start by making a positive choice, and an affirmative choice to free yourself from your desire to judge other people and your desire to feel that sense of superiority and that addictive rush of adrenaline that comes from feeling that rush of superiority, if you can make a positive choice to liberate yourself from that, you can make things better immediately around you, and you can show other people how to make things better immediately around them. And it doesn't mean being silent. It just means being able to be honest, without letting all of our fights about status interfere with the really important conversations we all need to have with each other. That's what I think of all of that. Okay. I'll be back in a minute for meditation, and then I'll send you on your way. All right. Hi, I'm back. Had a nice lunch, some leftover pizza. Susie made pizza last night. It was delicious. Like most food that she makes. She's very good, particularly with the dough. The start of the pandemic was... I was about to say the start of the pandemic was fun, which is not the word, but it was... Susie has been making sourdough. I mentioned earlier, we've been together over 5 years, and she's been making sourdough longer than that. She, in fact, has a sourdough starter that is older than our relationship. So everyone else, got really into making sourdough during the pandemic, and my wife was already doing a great job of it. There's definitely like a whole conversation to be had at some point about really amazing ways that we humans have figured out how to use microbes to make delicious things. It's part of the process with cheese. It's part of the process with sourdough. Any alcohol starts out with using microbes, and it's just, yeah, it's kind of crazy. We've figured out how to take these teeny tiny creatures that are so small we can't even see them unless there are a lot of them, and make amazing, delicious food or wine or beer or whatever. Yeah, it's kind of cool. The world is really amazing when you're not having to fight for survival. And our brains overcorrect for our need to fight for survival, and sort of are wired to tell us that we need to fight for survival based on times in the past when we've been afraid, and so that ends up really just exacerbating a lot of the conflict, and we get very caught up in the idea that we are right and what we're doing is just, and we avoid self-examination, and the whole bullshit machine just keeps going, and it's a recurring theme here. Anyway, one thing that helps that, and that helps our brains sort of adjust to sort of dulls that reactive fear-based instinct that we have, is meditation. And I know I've done it every episode now, which is kind of nice. It's honestly, it's good for me as a way to sort of keep my practice going. Because if I have to meditate as part of my video for this channel, then I have to meditate every day, and that's really good for me. So I've been doing it. I will probably upload my conversation with Michelle Lee Weldon at some point in the not too distant future, but she taught me that part of what meditation does is it actually changes some of the connections in our brain such that we are able to get sort of a larger perspective instead of being so caught up in the immediate things that feel like threats. Sometimes they are threats, but often they are not. And so meditation is a really good way to sort of be able to help your brain learn to distinguish between the things that feel true and the things that are true. And so that's why I practice it. So if you have been here before, you know the drill, but if not, I'm going to sit here for 10 minutes. I have the Insight Timer app on my iPad, and I have it set to a 10-minute meditation sequence, so it's going to I'll tell you when I'm starting. There'll be a bell. 10 minutes later, there'll be another bell. For the entire time in between, I am going to sit here and I'm not going to say anything. I'm just going to sit here with my eyes closed. And every time I breathe in, I'm going to think to myself, I follow my breath all the way in. And every time I breathe out, I'm going to think to myself, I follow my breath all the way out. And it's just about tracking these phrases in my head so that I have that gives me a thing to focus on, because the entire point of the exercise is to just sort of train your brain to focus, and because there's so much going on all around us all the time, even before smartphones and social media and all of that stuff came around. There was already a lot of stuff going on around us, and so now there's even more. There are just constant things fighting for our attention, and so we have, I want to say we've lost the ability to direct our own attention, but there's also an extent to which a lot of us never even had it, me very much included. And so this is a way to practice that skill. And so your brain is going to wander, your mind is going to wander, you're going to start thinking of other things, and that's fine. That's part of the process. That's the equivalent of trying to lift a really heavy weight, or I don't know, the better analogy, I guess, if we're using a weightlifting analogy, is like if you try to do as many reps as you can of a weight, eventually your muscles are going to fail. But that's part of the process. And so also eventually your attention is going to drift. And when that happens, you may not notice it at first. You may even go several minutes without noticing it, but eventually you will. And when you do realize that your mind has wandered away from I follow my breath all the way in, I follow my breath all the way out, to, oh, I wonder what's for dinner, or what time is the Mets game later, or whatever. When you notice that happening, I think a lot of people will have the instinct of be like, oh, God damn it, I'm such a moron. You don't need to do that. You don't need to get angry at yourself. It's part of the process. And if you feel angry, that's okay. You're going to feel whatever you're going to feel, but just forgive yourself and take a deep breath and just come right back. I follow my breath all the way in. I follow my breath all the way out. And smile to yourself, because every time you catch yourself, that's a small win. That's how you improve, is by catching yourself. You are never going to prevent your mind from wandering. What I have found is that over time, I get better at catching myself faster. And I do keep focus longer, but honestly, a good amount of the skill, I don't know, maybe it's 50-50, maybe it's more, maybe it's less, but a good amount of the skill is just being able to sort of recognize, oh, my mind has wandered, let's just come back, and not even really spend time on sort of processing what the wandering was. Just come back. So that's what we're gonna do. Bell's gonna start. We're gonna sit here and we're gonna silently, I follow my breath all the way in, I follow my breath all the way out, and then the bell's gonna go again in 10 minutes, and then we'll be done. And if you are, I certainly invite you to join me. But I also know that a lot of people will watch YouTube or whatever when they can't easily, maybe you're at work, maybe you just have the audio on and you're driving somewhere, whatever you're doing. If you can't stop and put it down, first off, if you don't want to, that's okay too. But if you can't, that's also okay. And you can just enjoy 10 minutes of silence and sort of try to practice whatever you're doing. Try to do it with some intention and attention. Even if you're doing something really boring, even if you're doing laundry, just try to have your attention on whatever you're doing, and that's a good exercise for all of our brains. Okay, we're gonna get started. Man, my hair is wacky today. Deep breath. You don't have to sound like Big Bird snoring. You can just breathe like a normal. But no one has ever accused me of being normal. I've been accused of a lot of things, but being normal has really never been one of them. I was talking, just a brief digression, but when my dad was here over the weekend, I was sort of telling him about, this channel and what I'm trying to do. And what I said was, I don't know if this will be something that people want to watch or listen to, but what I do know is that I am different. And so I may as well share my differences with people and try to do whatever small thing I can do to make things a little better around here on Spaceship Earth. Okay, that was, man, I've rambled for like almost 10 minutes. Great. Okay, meditation time. Again, I'm going to push this button. It's going to count down. I'll give you some sense of the countdown. There's going to be a bell. I'm going to follow my breath all the way in, follow my breath all the way out for 10 minutes, and then after 10 minutes there will be another bell and we'll be done. Okay. I just push start. 14 seconds, 13, 12, 11, and so on. I hope you enjoy. I hope you get something out of this, and I'll see you in a bit. I gotta say, the more I do this, the faster the time seems to go. That was lovely. I hope it was as lovely for you as it was for me. There was definitely a good amount of extraneous noise here. Plus, I'm in the driveway and Susie is on a phone call around the back of the house. And so I can't make out any of the words she's saying, but I sort of, like, her voice tends to drift in and out there. And also there was a chainsaw because tree work and whatnot. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed those 10 minutes of silence. I hope you got something good out of them. And I hope you have a lovely remainder of your day. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye. 4 buckets. Which one are you going to drink from next? I drink this bucket. It has flavor water. More water. This dog drinks more water than any dog in the history of dogs. Still going. Yeah.